What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackline, joined always by my main man, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talker. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, man, what a wild week it has been. The NFL draft has come and gone, and just when you thought things were starting to kind of slow down and well, maybe the Steelers have their team and maybe we can move on from all of the rumor mills that have been flying around over this offseason when it comes to potential trades and acquisitions of some major names out there. Well, they heat right back up. The Pittsburgh Steelers are reportedly in on another move, a big move, a quote-unquote significant playmaker. We're going to dive into what we're hearing and what it means and potentially means for the Pittsburgh Steelers and their next move following the NFL draft. It's been a beautiful week out in the Berg, but just before we got started, I had a sneezing fest because it is allergy season. How are we feeling, my friend? I hope the allergies aren't getting you down there.
No, it is pollen season, so it's all over my car and all over my balcony, patio furniture and stuff like that. But
Yes.
fortunately, it hasn't quite hit me yet. So we're in a good spot here. And I'm very thankful that Omar Khan at least took one day off after the
Yes.
NFL draft before he started stirring crap up.
Yes, I agree. One day was needed. I'm more thankful that he got some sleep. You know, I was starting to get a little nervous that this guy was just going to just work forever and never take a day off. I'm thankful that he did, but he's right back on the clock. He's right back moving. I mean, the drama, the nonsense, the rumors are flying all over the place. And I got to say that yesterday, and we're going to dive into everything that happened and what it means and what we're hearing. And, you know, because obviously you start to hear all these things and you start to do your own investigating and, hey, what can I figure out? So on and so forth. I got to give a shout out to a couple of people here. For one, it is all of the people. Can you hear the construction going on right outside my
I can't.
window here? Wow, that's wild because it sounds like a herd of elephants is running by my window. You got to give a shout out to everybody who stayed quiet. There were all the rumors flying all over the place. There's all these fake Twitter accounts and all these random people just saying, oh, well, Devontae Adams, oh, well, this, oh, well, this. And, you know, it stirs the pot more than needs to be stirred. So I'm very grateful for the people who, hey, let's wait for real information to become available. I think that's the best way to approach some things. And then secondly, shout out to my neighbors who I started a group chat with. And I said, hey, I'm getting every piece of information as it comes in, and I need somebody to ride the roller coaster with. So you're going to ride it with me. So shout out to them. For those of you who do not know what has gone on over the last, I don't know, 15 to 20 hours or so, former Pittsburgh Steelers cornerback, current CBS Sports analyst Bryant McFadden tweeted out that the Pittsburgh Steelers are quote-unquote closing in on a significant playmaker, and immediately everybody started running wild with it. We've kind of locked into the reports of this is a wide receiver trade in the making. The Pittsburgh Steelers are actively pursuing at least one big name following the NFL draft. And I think everybody could kind of key in on a couple of names here or there that they believe they are targeting. Now, let me ask this, because I've heard some things. I have some reports of my own of what is happening with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You saw it all. You see everything flying around. Who's the name that popped out to you? Where was your thought process in the whole thing?
I mean, the name that stands out to me is Cortland Sutton, mainly because the Broncos are in a position where, yeah, they could trade a Cortland Sutton. They're kind of starting from scratch out there in Denver with Sean Payton getting Bo Nix. He brought in Bo Nix's number one receiver from Oregon and Troy Franklin. So he's kind of starting over in Denver. So it makes sense to maybe be moving on from a guy in Cortland Sutton who has been in trade speculation and rumors for over a year. The Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel stuff, it's weird because the San Francisco 49ers went out and got Ricky Pearsall with a first-round pick. If you're going to do that, plus have these other weapons already, are you feeling that that is your one pick and one piece that you're missing? Or are you going to trade one of your big guys? That's, to me, I'm not exactly sure where they stand because they're certainly in go-for-it mode. But when you draft a receiver to an already stacked offensive weapons with a first-round pick, I'm not exactly sure where that puts them. So the name that stood out to me the most was Cortland Sutton.
Yeah, I think everybody started thinking Cortland Sutton was the guy. I'll say this. So it started going off. Everybody started talking about, hey, who could it be? Where are the Pittsburgh Steelers going to trade with? Or who are the Pittsburgh Steelers going to trade with? What's the big name that they're going to land? And I start digging. I start, hey, what are we hearing? I start making phone calls. This is what I have come up with. The name Cortland Sutton has not been presented to me, and it has popped up. I mean, Benjamin Albright, you could take that tweet as you will. For those of you who have not seen it, he tweeted out, he's a Denver Broncos insider. He tweeted out, reunited, and it feels so good. And immediately everybody goes, there it is, Russell Wilson, Cortland Sutton, but Zach Azadi's here as well. It could have a bunch of meanings. Then he later goes back and says, no, that's not true. There are other reports floating out there from Denver that the Steelers and the Broncos are not trading for Cortland Sutton, that is not going to happen right now. So that's not a name that was tossed out to me. The names that were tossed out to me were Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk, that the 49ers and the Steelers were having conversations. I don't know how early in the process this is. That's where it gets interesting, is what BMAC tweeted, you have to look at and say, what is closing in on, and how early in the process was it? Because if they were closing in, I would imagine a deal was already getting done. And I get it. Sometimes you get information and you misinterpret it and you put it out there and you maybe jump the gun a little bit. And I think that may be what happened in this instance. I'm not saying that a trade isn't going to happen. I think a trade is going to happen. I've been standing firm with the belief that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to make a trade, because everything I've been told up until this point is that the Pittsburgh Steelers want to land a wide receiver in the trade market, and their eyes have been on Brandon Aiyuk the entire time, that they have not taken their eyes off of Brandon Aiyuk, that every time you get a guy like John Lynch not going to happen, Omar Khan just calls again and says, hey, what about now? So I think that that's the name. I was told the latest updates that I got are that the Steelers and the 49ers are talking, that they're in talks, that they have been in talks, that no matter how much John Lynch says they're not going to trade a wide receiver, the Steelers feel that they are going to trade for a wide receiver. The problem is that the price tag is high. The Steelers may not be willing to give up the price tag that the San Francisco 49ers want for either Brandon Aiyuk or Deebo Samuels. But at the same time, Deebo kind of wants out, because after all the trade rumors started, it upset him, obviously, as it probably would have. And he no longer feels, I guess, as happy as he once was 72, 84 hours ago, whatever that next number is in the 24-hour system. That's where we stand with the Pittsburgh Steelers in a trade for a wide receiver. If I had to guess what one it is, I'm going to still guess that Brandon Aiyuk finds his way to the Pittsburgh Steelers before this is all said and done, because it just feels like that's the guy that they want more than any other. I toss out those names. How realistic does it sound? Kind of sounds like I'm talking out my butt, or you feel like maybe there's a chance?
I feel like, again, it goes back to what they did over the draft weekend. Now, it is weird to think that some people were saying that, it was going to happen the Monday after the draft, because at this point, the clock resets, right? There was that one deadline of the NFL draft that came and went. They didn't get a deal done. San Francisco made a couple interesting moves, but why would it get done the Monday after, right? They have time to work this out. San Francisco, if they want that high price, they can hold out a little bit longer. It's not like anything's going to change between now and OTAs. Nothing's going to change between now and training camp, other than maybe the frustration of the players. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing as far as the timeline goes, is how frustrated do one of Brandon Aiyuk or Deebo Samuel get with all the speculation, and at what point do they come out and say, just like, trade me already, I'm not going to play? And if that doesn't happen, San Francisco has no clock right now. I mean, the regular season, maybe, training camp, maybe, but at the end of the day, it feels like if it's going to happen, the Monday after the draft would have been a very shocking timeline to me.
Yeah, I think it would have been early in the process, but I wouldn't rule it out. Like, I was a little bit, just like you said, surprised that it happened as quickly as it did, that the news hit as quickly as it did. I still look at it as a very likely possibility. I'm going to say this. If I had to guess when it does happen, it's in the next week. I would say that my timeline has moved up. I still think that if it doesn't happen within the next week, that we go right up until week one of I said it yesterday. Right up until week one of the NFL season is when the Steelers, okay, we don't need a wide receiver, becomes like probably not going to happen now. And I think if they go into week one and they realize, wow, we need a wide receiver, Omar Khan gets on the phone immediately Sunday night. I'm just saying, I could see it happening within a week, only because I think the NFL draft and all the rumors that started there sparked something in San Francisco. I know Kyle Shanahan wants to keep his wide receiver core and he wants to hunt for a Super Bowl, and that's where they're standing here. But I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are digging little and little and little, bit by bit by bit, and eventually they're going to hit a spot where they go, okay, this makes some sense for both sides. Let's make it happen. I don't know why the Steelers are looking as hard as they are to go get a wide receiver. I guess they really truly believe that is the turning point. That is the difference between where they stand right now as a contender and where they could stand as a winner. I don't know. They do. I will say this. I think it could happen in a week. If I had to guess compensation and name, I would guess Brandon Aiyuk, and I would guess maybe a second-round pick in the 2025 NFL draft. I don't think it's higher than that. I think Deebo Samuel is actually less than that. If I had to predict a move, the craziest part is that the most realistic name was Cortland Sutton coming into this, and from what I hear, it's not Cortland Sutton. And there are other names out there. There's rumors floating around about Devontae Adams. There's rumors floating around about DK Metcalf. I will say this, none of them are true. Not one of them. You know, AB was the closest I got because I actually got a text yesterday. This is how wild this is. I texted you and Steven in the group chat, and I said, dude, there's no way this is about to happen, but maybe it is. I got a text yesterday that's just said, this was just the text. It said, look at AB's tweet. And I said, okay. I said, there's no way it's, and I texted back. I said, Devontae Adams or Terry McLaurin. There's no way that it's one of those guys. And all I got back were 3 dots, ... in a text. And I said, what are you doing to me right now? First off, who does that to somebody? Second off, could we stop playing games and maybe at least give us a little bit of something? That's where we stand. I don't think that there is anything locked in. I don't know how close a deal is for anybody. I think that there's a lot of nonsense floating out there. I'm not saying BMAC's tweet is nonsense. I think that he really has something there. I think that the Steelers are really working, but I don't think that closing in is as close as people want to make it out to seem, or maybe that we all interpreted it to be, because I think he might have just a little bit jumped the gun on where they stand with an actual move here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's answer some questions because we got a couple of people that we really appreciate, and obviously we want to get to them real fast. Michael, appreciate you. Out of all the wide receivers we can trade for, who looks like the most realistic and which one makes the most sense? The most realistic right now, just from what I am hearing, is Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuels. Those are the names that the Steelers are pursuing. Those are the names that, you know, they're actually in talks with right now when it comes to the 49ers. I don't know how close that deal is, but those are the ones. The one that makes the most sense, I'll just go out of those two because I think Cortland Sutton makes the most sense. But out of those two, I actually think Deebo Samuel makes the most sense, strictly because you get him for 2 years. It's a giant price tag, but you only have to deal with it for 2 years. It's going to be a lower price tag than what Brandon Aiyuk's going to be for the next 3 years, maybe 4 years. And you can make that work with the quarterback situation that you have right now as the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I would say Deebo Samuel is the most realistic option out of the three, which is wild to say because as of 4 days ago, that was not a real thing to talk about. Guys, the Steelers around 1989 ran a 2 tight end set with Cooper and Green that made QB Bobby Brister, baby, look like a god. Look good. With Fields at quarterback, we could be scary good. I mean, I agree. I think the Steelers could run the football and have a great running dynamic with Justin Fields. I expect a lot of 2 tight end sets this year, as well as 0 questions asked. And then Chris, again, if the Steelers get Aiyuk, I hope he isn't a headache like Antonio Brown. I don't expect him to be. I've heard great things about Brandon Aiyuk as a teammate and everything that follows. You're shaking your head down there. What's your thoughts?
It would be very hard to be a headache like Antonio Brown. I would commend anybody that can reach those levels.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. Nobody's Antonio Brown. And if he starts making up words, at least there's warning signs, you know?
Yeah.
You could look at it and say, not going to happen. Let's continue the conversation about where a wide receiver lands and kind of what to expect when it comes to a move for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think what they're giving up is the next thing to talk about here, because if they're going to give up a 2nd-round pick, are you comfortable with it? Are you comfortable with the 1st-round pick next year? I won't lie to you. I don't think that I am in a trade for a wide receiver.
To me, if you're giving up anything, a 2nd-round pick next year means very little to me. A first rounder I have to think about, but if it's a second round pick for especially one of the guys we've mentioned, especially if it's a guy like a Devontae Adams or a Deebo Samuel, I'm 100% on board with giving up a second round pick. A first round pick, like I said, there's a little bit more pause that goes into that discussion. But the question then becomes to me is, how important do you view your pass game? Like, I don't think you can go through this summer without adding another receiver, because yeah, Roman Wilson, George Pickens, Calvin Austin, that's fine, especially considering the Steelers are going to run the ball. But how much better does it sound when it's just even Cortland Sutton, right?
Yep.
George Pickens, Cortland Sutton, and Roman Wilson sounds so much better than that. So if it's a second round pick, that's the difference between the former and the latter, I'm sending out that second round pick.
Yeah, look at I think I agree. Depending on the name, I'm cool with the second round pick. I think you could get. I think what you're going to get in the second round. I also think that it's easier to acquire a second round pick moving forward. You know, you give up a first round pick, it's tough to get back into the first round. It's that you're going to give up a lot to get back into the first round. I think you give up a second round pick. Where the Steelers stand next year, they have a couple of moves. Maybe they don't have a sixth round pick, depending on, you know, how much Justin Fields plays, I guess. I look at it and say it's a good spot to be in because you could move back up, get a second round pick, work yourself from there. You could give up future picks. You could, make moves. You don't know who's going to be around. You don't know what guys you could wheel and deal next year that are currently on your contract or under contract for them. I think there are a lot of ways that you can make a second round pick work. First round pick, I don't think is as easy. And I don't think it's honestly worth it. Like, you could talk, Brandon Aiyuk be the best player in the draft next year. I agree. I don't think Deebo Samuels would be. I'm not as high on Deebo as a lot of people. I think Brandon Aiyuk would be, but I also think Brandon Aiyuk be 27 years old. Like, you go get a rookie, then 2 years could be Brandon Aiyuk, and he's costing you half as much. I'm not sold on giving up a first round pick. I think that's what San Francisco wants, is a first round pick for their wide receivers. I think it's crazy. But I think that once they find themselves in a spot where Brandon Aiyuk's saying, look, I'm not coming to town, man. I'm not coming without a paycheck. You're going to give me a massive contract. And then they got to make a decision on whether or not they're going to pay Deebo or whether or not they're going to pay Brandon Aiyuk. They make a decision then. You know, once their back's against the wall, it makes a lot of sense. To go off of this, I think Deebo Samuel fits Arthur Smith's offense better. I think a lot of people are bringing up the whole, well, you already have a Cordero Patterson, you already have a Calvin Austin, you already have a Roman Wilson. Why do you need all these guys? I agree with you. I think that you could have a bunch of guys with similar skill sets and make that offense work, because the Steelers are just trying to run the ball and be a West Coast offense and succeed with just ground and pound, hard nose hitting football. I think that's who Deebo Samuel is. And I think that works out really well for what the Steelers are trying to do. My whole thing is, don't try to be the Kansas City Chiefs, try to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And to do that, you gotta be different. And I think that's the Steelers' best way to go about it. All right. I think there's some good questions here. Let's dive into some questions. Is there any that start with the wide receiver? I'd like to start there.
We do have a couple that start with the wide receiver. Robert Hitty says, how come no one is talking about Tyler Boyd anymore? With the restructuring, the money is there.
Yeah, so Tyler Boyd is off the table for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The two sides just are not going to come to an agreement. I don't think Tyler Boyd was ever like a realistic option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think at one point they had some talks, but I don't know how, serious the Steelers were at making an aggressive offer. Tyler Boyd is not a name the Steelers are interested in as we sit here currently. I would say DJ Chark or Chark, excuse me. There are other names out there on the free agency market that actually stand above Tyler Boyd, but I think the ship really has sailed with Tyler Boyd and the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just not a name that's coming to Pittsburgh.
LA says, what about Mims, the receiver the Steelers got from the Jets?
Denzel Mims is on the roster. I do not think he's going to make the roster, but he is on the roster. I just wasn't impressed at what I saw. They're the same way. They're not looking at him as a guy who's going to resurge himself and be a playmaker in Pittsburgh. I look at him like they tried with Anthony Miller a couple of years ago. Maybe they get something, but they have no expectations for him. And if I had to guess, Denzel Mims is on the practice squad again in 2024. And that's an okay place to be for Pittsburgh, at least. You have a guy who maybe at best could come in here and be a little bit productive if you absolutely need him to be.
LA Brooks has another question, says, what happened to all the talk with Tyler Lockett?
Yeah, so Tyler Lockett is an interesting name because all these rumors are flying out yesterday, and you're talking about what's going on with the Steelers and who are they going to land in a wide receiver trade, and you're talking about all the options, and if Devontae Adams and Terry McLaurin pop up and you're talking, well, what about everybody else? Tyler Lockett's name jumps in there as well. I asked about Tyler Lockett. I was told that Tyler Lockett is not on the board for the Pittsburgh Steelers, that he's just not an option that they've been looking at. I don't know if they will in the future, but I would say right now where we stand currently, there are not many people who, looking at Tyler Lockett, and trying to make a trade for him in the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. Before we go to the next one, almost forgotten. I appreciate you for reminding me. We got a break here. We got to give a shout out to our boys over at The Perfect Gene. We will be back in 3 minutes. Do not leave and drop all of your questions. Guys, this is a public service announcement, and it is urgent. You think that you have mastered the look in sweatpants and joggers? Well, guess what, my friend? You have not. You are one step away from wearing pajamas in public, and your significant other is starting to think that you look like a slob. It's time to take your sexy ass and put it in some jeans. If you take anything away from today's show, it's that the Perfect Gene isn't just another pair of stiff, uncomfortable, nut-crushing pants. They have cracked the code on solving your denim difficulties, and it is time to rejoice. Check them out. Always looking good. The Perfect Gene makes great-looking, perfect-fitting jeans that are as comfortable as sweatpants and more stretchy than a kangaroo's pouch. It's made from a special denim fabric that's super soft, just like sweatpants, just like joggers, but it doesn't make you look like a slob. And the best part, they make 6 fits from skinny to thick. Waist sizes from 26 to 50 and lengths from 26 to 38. So whether you are a thick guy or a short king, or guess what, anything in between, they perfectly fit your body and accentuate your assets. Pun intended. Trust us when we say that these are truly fucking perfect jeans. Once you try them on, you'll never go back. Once again, boom. For a limited time, our listeners get 15% off their first order plus free shipping at theperfectgene.nyc, or just Google The Perfect Gene and use our code ALLSteelers15 for 15% off. Look it. I have been looking for a while. I have been talking to my fiance daily. I need to find a look. I've tried them all. I tried khakis. I tried joggers. I tried sweatpants. I tried shorts. Nothing fits me like the Perfect Jeans fit me. The Perfect Gene doesn't just stop there, though. They've revolutionized T-shirts as well. The Perfect Tee has just enough stretch to hide the beer belly while accentuating your arms and chest for that flawless look. It's soft like butter without shrinking in the wash like all your other T-shirts. It's just, perfect. The Perfect Gene always has free shipping, always has free exchanges, and always has free returns. So you can have peace of mind knowing that your order is completely risk-free. It's finally time to stop crushing your balls in uncomfortable jeans by going to theperfectgene.nyc. Our listeners get 15% off your first order plus free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges when you use our code ALLSteelers15 at checkout. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectgene.nyc with promo code ALLSteelers15. After your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please, please, please give us some support and tell them that we sent you. Fuck your khakis and get the Perfect Gene. I apologize for everybody who's at work and who's sitting there going, wow, dude, this guy just dropped the F word like 4 times in an ad read. But it is a fun ad read. So shout out to Perfect Gene. We appreciate you and everything that they've done for us. Let's jump back into some questions here. Chris has a really good one for us. Guys, this may be a fantasy, but bringing in Larry Fitzgerald on a 1-year deal to mentor George Pickens be a good idea? Larry could teach. Nick, I'm going to ask you before I even say anything here. We've talked about Larry Ogunjobi coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers more than once since he has stepped away from the game of football. You bring him back at, I don't know, he's got to be 35, 36 years old at this point. Hasn't played in the league in 2 years. Does he come back to the Pittsburgh Steelers?
As a coach? Sure. Yeah. The door is wide open for Larry Fitzgerald to come in as a coach. As a player, people, I don't think, understand how difficult it is once you get out of that game to get right back into the game. And I understand the lift is not going to be very heavy for Larry Fitzgerald. They're not going to ask him to do very much if they do end up going down that road. But I think it's been a little too long separated. And at the age of 35 plus, I think that's a little bit too much to ask of Larry Fitzgerald. But hey, he wants to be a coach. He wants to be an advisor, maybe pop in and out whenever he wants. Just give him that advisory role. I'm all for it. I don't see any issues with that. It's only up to whether or not he wants to do it.
Yeah. You want to come just hang out at the Pittsburgh Steelers facility, eat some lunch, talk with the media guys. That's great. I'd have a blast. I'd enjoy every second of it. I bet you George Pickens would too. I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers would turn it down. That being said, I don't think he wants to leave his home in Arizona to come live in the freezing cold Pittsburgh Steel City, for the rest of his life, or especially during football season, man. Arizona's a much better time to be from November to March. So I would imagine he's not coming over. It would be awesome. Be a great mentor. I just don't think it's realistic. I would like to see, I guess, some sort of veteran at some point get a chance to mentor a guy like George Pickens, but I don't think that's going to happen in Pittsburgh. I just don't.
We got a question from Chris here that says, the real question I have is, do the Steelers trade away players like Freiermuth, Dan Moore to make room financially for a guy like a Brandon Aiyuk?
So the thing here is that neither of those guys make financial impact, really. Pat Freiermuth's hit has got to be under $3 million. Can you look both of those up? Dan Moore is definitely only like $1 million, $1 million plus. It's not enough money to actually make an impact for either of these guys. I'll tell you this, all the nonsense about Pat Freiermuth being on the trade block during the NFL draft was hilarious. It was laughable how hilarious. You don't invite a guy to go make your second round selection. And there's no way that Omar Khan, Art Rooney, and Mike Tomlin do not know that is happening during the NFL draft. They're not surprised that Pat Freiermuth walked up to make the second round pick. You don't do that and then say, oh, we're going to trade Pat Freiermuth. I don't think Pat Freiermuth's on the trade block. I think the Steelers love him, and they are very excited to have an opportunity with an offensive coordinator who could utilize tight ends. And you can say whatever you want about Kyle Pitts last year. Kyle Pitts, as a rookie, broke the Falcons rookie receiving yards record. So I think that there's potential there. Dan Moore is the same way. I could see Dan Moore getting traded at some point this summer, but I don't think it's going to be for financial reasons. I think it's just because they're going to be able to get something for a guy that they're probably going to cut. So I don't see Dan Moore having a place in Pittsburgh. Neither of them are for financial reasons. What's their cap hits?
Combined, 5.4. Combined. Yeah. And they're both going to be unrestricted free agents after this season. Dan Moore's is at 3.5 and Pat Freiermuth is at 1.9 as far as the cap hit.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. I don't see either of them. Dan Moore, I think, is going to get traded, but not for the Brandon Aiyuk situation.
Thomas Martin has more of a statement than a question here, but we wanted to highlight it. The con man likes the smoke screens. Could it be Debo or Aiyuk?
I mean, yeah. The big thing here is yes. The answer is yes. It's most likely going to be either Debo or Brandon Aiyuk. If I had to guess, it's one of those two. That's just who the Steelers have in mind. That's what I've been told the Steelers are hunting for. That's the team that the Steelers are currently talking to. It's a matter of whether or not the 49ers are willing to budge, because right now they're being stubborn, but they've been stubborn the whole time. I think that'll change at some point. But for right now, yes, my guess would be Debo Samuels or Brandon Aiyuk.
Pittsburgh Hornets also has a wide receiver question. Who would you say is flying way under the radar that the Steelers could take at wide receiver?
Way under the radar. That's interesting. I guess we're going to get, this is a bit of a fantasy, I would say. None of this is like anything I've heard or anything, but if I want to toss a name out there that's way under the radar for the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's got to be Noah Brown. I would say it's got to be Noah Brown. And the way I look at Noah Brown, and it is the least splashy name for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I get it, but we're flying way under the radar here. Least splashy name for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Noah Brown. And the only reason I say that is because he starts off as a wide receiver 2 next to George Pickens, and he transitions into a wide receiver 3 after Roman Wilson shows out and becomes the wide receiver 2. I think that's a perfect fit for what the Steelers are looking for. And then you could hope that Calvin Austin transitions into the wide receiver 3 and Noah Brown transitions into wide receiver 4. I just think that makes sense. You want to toss out like a crazy under the radar name that might be super high? Terry McLaurin. I don't think he's going to stay in Washington. I don't think they want him to stay in Washington. I would say it's Terry McLaurin's the big splash under the radar guy, but I don't think it's going to happen.
If it's Terry McLaurin, George Pickens is a number 2 again. That's all I'll say. I don't think George,
Yeah, 100%.
like 100% that Terry McLaurin is a number one over George Pickens, especially this year.
Yes. Yeah, especially in 2024. Especially in 2024.
Mayhem has a really good way to transition out of the wide receiver talk and into the rest of the team. B-Mac never said it was a trade. Do you think it could just be a Najee Harris extension?
Yeah, so he said, I like where you're going with this, but he said that landing a significant playmaker. So you have to imagine that, you're looking at an acquisition here. And I could see if it's not a wide receiver trade, it's a signing of some sort. I know everybody talked about Patrick Peterson. I've been told it's not Patrick Peterson. I just going off of what I've been told, it's a wide receiver trade. Like that's just from what I've been told. And I, again, like I don't have a name. I've been given that the Steelers are talking to the 49ers. I haven't been given anything else specific. So I don't know how close anything is, but I don't think it's a signing. And I don't think it's a cornerback. I think they're locked in at wide receiver. And I don't, just to go to Najee Harris' extension, I think I would not be upset if the Steelers extended Najee Harris, but I don't anticipate that happening this year.
L.A. Brooks also has a question saying, do we have any talks with Cam Sutton coming back on the cornerback side?
Yeah, there are definitely talks. They, after Jerry Dulac tweeted that out and said, hey, the Steelers met with Cam Sutton, I reached out to my sources and they confirmed that the Steelers have reached out to Cam Sutton and they have spoken. The NFL is most likely going to suspend Cam Sutton to some degree. We just don't know what that degree is going to be. I think that's going to play a role, but I could see Cam Sutton coming back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that makes a lot of sense for this team. Just simply football. If we're going to talk simply straight football, nothing else included, Cam Sutton makes a lot of sense for this football team. He could play the slot, and he's a really good slot cornerback. You could talk about how he had a bad year in Detroit last year. I agree that he had a bad year in Detroit last year, but he was the number one cornerback for a team that was facing teams who needed a better number one cornerback. And you could come to Pittsburgh and be the number three. I think that's phenomenal. The Steelers loved Cam Sutton when he was here. I still think that they do love Cam Sutton. And simply football, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Hybrid God had a question along the same lines as that. Says, you may have covered it, but who you watching at slot corner? Is that Cam Sutton, or is there somebody else that you have your eyes on?
Cam Sutton is the name to watch right now. Patrick Peterson, I don't think the Steelers want Patrick Peterson back, but I think they'll take him if they need to. I think the same thing with Chandon Sullivan. I could see the Steelers going with Cam Sutton and like somewhat in the next like month, maybe month and a half. I could see Cam Sutton being a name once they find out what the suspension and everything's going to look like. That's when that decision will be made. But I say Cam Sutton's the name to watch there.
We have one more slot cornerback question here. Teeman says Beanie Bishop as the team slot corner.
I love Beanie Bishop. I think Beanie Bishop's going to be a stud. He gives me Mike Hilton vibes. That being said, he's an undrafted guy, and you can't have any expectations. It's the same thing with Corey Trice. I get comments constantly, and people saying like, hey, what are you doing about Corey Trice? Why is nobody talking about Corey Trice? You just don't know what to expect out of Corey Trice. You can't sit here and say the Steelers have any expectations for him because they don't. They don't know what they're going to get off of him. Beanie Bishop's the same way. He's an undrafted guy, and yeah, it could be awesome, but he's an undrafted guy, and there are reasons that he went undrafted. So you have no expectations going into rookie minicamp. You have no expectations going into OTAs and minicamp. Once we get to training camp and we start to see how good these guys are, that's when you could start to develop your expectations for them. And that's when we'll find out how good Beanie Bishop actually is.
Teresa had a statement here that you wanted to highlight, said, trade Minkah. He's on the back end of his career, and while he's been asked to play out of position, he's not had a stellar year since his first season with the Steelers.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight this because I just highly disagree with it. And Teresa, I think you make good points, and I think I like your thought process here, but I just don't agree that Minkah's on the back end of his career. I think Minkah's dealt with some injuries and has had a really bad defense around him, especially in the secondary. I'm very excited to see what he can do with a cornerback room and a safety room that actually has quality play around it, a linebacker core that is actually pretty good, and an offense that doesn't exhaust their defense. I just think that everything's been working against all these guys the last couple of years. I'm very excited to see what Minkah Fitzpatrick brings. And I'll tell you this, the Steelers would never in a million years trade Minkah Fitzpatrick. They wouldn't even consider it. That dude's a leader. They love him. Everybody in the locker room loves him. Mike Tomlin loves him. There are, how like you joked about Russell Wilson, like there are all the jokes about Denver and Russell Wilson having his own office and blah, blah, blah. there is an office for the quarterback in the Pittsburgh Steelers room, but it's not just the quarterbacks. Everybody could use it. There are two people that are in there every single day last year, and that is Kenny Pickett and Minkah Fitzpatrick, and they are watching tape, and he is helping Kenny develop, and he is helping this. The dude is a leader. They would never get rid of Minkah. They love Minkah.
Chris has a question here. It says, serious question, guys. I feel the Steelers are lacking a run-stuffing nose tackle. Who could the Steelers trade for to fill that role?
They won't trade for anybody not to fill that role. Keanu Benton's that guy right now. I think Keanu Benton's a great run stuffer if he could. I think in year 2, I have high expectations. I don't think he is a natural nose tackle. I would rather him play defensive tackle. And I don't think Logan Lee is that guy either. He's way too small to play the nose. They need a nose tackle. I agree with you. I don't think they'd trade for one. I just don't think that they'd look at it that way. I could see a situation where Larry Ogunjobi just isn't working out, and they decide that he's got to get benched, and you got Dean Lowry, but Keanu Benton's going to start on the outside or at a defensive end position, excuse me. And then you go out and you sign like I don't know, is Ndamukong Suh still playing in the NFL? A name like that, like a big giant just come in here at the end of the season, play nose tackle. I could see that happening, but Keanu's their guy right now, and they're not going to trade for anybody.
Sajen takes it back to wide receivers, saying, how available is a guy like Jalen Waddle out of Miami? If he is, would he be a guy of interest for the Steelers?
He is not available out of Miami. I have asked some people in Miami if they would ever even consider it, and they said no. They also just picked up his 50-year option. I think that clearly indicates that they're not ready to move on from him just yet. I don't think Jalen Waddle's on the board for anybody. Would be a good move, but I don't think he's an option.
Pittsburgh Hornets has a question here saying, jokingly, PFF gave the Steelers an A+ rating in the draft. So do you think all the players they took are great at pass rush win rate?
I let you read that without reading it itself. That's a good one, actually. That's a really good one, Pittsburgh. I would imagine that they're all fantastic pass rush win rates. And you know what? If I had to guess who wins Defensive Player of the Year this year, it would be all of them, because I bet you Roman Wilson's really good at whatever nonsense, non-real stat a wide receiver could have in the NFL. Separation rate. Let's go. Roman Wilson's separation rate. Fantastic at it. Rookie of the Year.
Thomas Barton continues the trend with the draft pick, says, which draft pick do you think will make the biggest impact this season?
The biggest impact this season. I mean, I think it's the two offensive linemen. I think it's Troy Fautanu and Zach Frazier. I don't want to separate those two, because I think they both make equal impact. I think they're going to be day one starters, phenomenal impact guys. Like, I don't know what side Troy or Broderick Jones is going to start at. I think Broderick Jones is going to stay on the right side and Troy's going to stay on the left side. But I think that just having an offensive line is exactly what the Pittsburgh Steelers need, and I think those guys are going to be monsters right from day one. Very excited for what they bring to the team. I would say both of those guys would be my pick.
Noah Thomas has another question along the same line, says, out of the 2023 non-starters and all of the 2024 draft class, who do you think are the starters or heavy rotation guys this year?
That's a great question, actually. That's a very good question. Wow, that's tough. That is a tough question. I'll tell you this. I'll give you a name. Heavy rotation guys this year, and I'm going to say impact guys this year, because you could go 2024 draft class. I think Troy, I think Zach Frazier, I think Peyton Wilson, I think Roman Wilson. They're all gonna be impact guys. They're all gonna play a lot this season. Calvin Austin's my name to watch. I think Calvin Austin's gonna be a guy that like, I joke about it a lot, but dude, you go back and you watch last year's tape, and Matt Canada had this 5'4" guy, 130 pounds, soaking wet, trying to block linebackers. What are you doing? Like, who was sitting in the meeting room going, yeah, you think Calvin? Do you know who number 19 is? Because he's Calvin Austin and he's about 4'3". Just not going to work out. I think in Arthur Smith's offense, he's got a lot more potential. I think Calvin Austin's going to be a good player this year. I really, really do. I have a lot of expectations for Calvin Austin. He would be my answer here.
Joshua Williams wants to know, could DK or Lockett be an option to studs? Obviously, we touched on it before, but of the two, I'll add to this. Of the two, who do you think would mesh best with the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Oh, DK Metcalf would mesh best with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that guy is a stud. I think he's a superstar. I like Geno Smith and I like that offense, but I just think that DK's got one route in Seattle, and it's run straight and jump high. And I think that in Pittsburgh, you could do a lot more than that. My issue with DK, man, is that, like George Pickens is a bit of a hothead. We saw it last year. They got rid of Chase Claypool because he was a bit of a hothead. You saw it the year before. DK Metcalf is the ultimate hothead. He's the ultimate hothead in the NFL, especially when it comes to wide receivers. Like, this guy is a walking penalty. I don't think it's going to work. It would work out in Pittsburgh. I think he is the better fit, no doubt about it. Tyler Lockett, I like Tyler Lockett, but Tyler Lockett's good, man, but he's just a better Deontay Johnson, and I think they're looking for a little bit of something different. So I could say I would pick DK Metcalf, but I don't think either of them are options for the Steelers.
I think the Steelers are hoping Roman Wilson turns into a little bit of a Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, that's exactly. I think they want him to turn into like a Hines Ward. I think they want him to just, like him on this conference call saying, if you just tell me to go out there and kick somebody's ass, I'll kick somebody's ass. I was immediately all smiles. I was like, yeah, Mike Tomlin somewhere just got like his heart just started pumping and he just wanted to run through a wall and he wasn't even in the room. So yeah, I think Roman Wilson's gonna be a little bit of everybody.
John wants to know, do you think Corey Davis could be an option? Played with Smith at Tennessee.
I do. I said that earlier. I think it really could be an option. I think that's later in the summer an option if the Steelers don't end up with a wide receiver anymore. But I could see Corey Davis being out there. I don't know what a year and a half away from football does for somebody, and it never ends up being really good for them. But I could see Corey Davis being an option, especially if like Van Jefferson and Quez Watkins stink. Then maybe you bring in another wide receiver 4 or 5 and try to make it work.
Chris has a question, not even a question, a statement here. Says Pickens needs a mentor badly. No more ABs for us. I do have a small question here for you. Do you think, I know it's not the same position, but do you think a guy like Russell Wilson being the quarterback helps George Pickens along on that off the field side?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Russell Wilson, the reason the Steelers brought in Russell Wilson was not because Russell Wilson is the greatest quarterback of all time, although they think that he could be. It's because they needed a leader on the offensive side of the ball, and Kenny Pickett wasn't getting it done. That was the reason they fired Matt Canada. You could say whatever you want about how bad he was. He was bad. The reason the final straw broke is because Matt Canada had zero control of that offense, and they were running rampant, and there were negative headlines everywhere, and everything was falling apart, and their offensive coordinator had no control there. That's why they loved a guy like Arthur Smith, because they believe Arthur Smith is a no-nonsense offensive coordinator. That's why they wanted Russell Wilson, because he's a quarterback who could lead. Yes, I think that both of those guys are massive for George Pickens and for everybody else. George Pickens made the headlines, but you got a lot of young guys in there that need some mentorship, and they didn't have any the last couple of years. And I think this is big for them to add those two. But yeah, they would never, anybody who ever slightly represents Antonio Brown, just no. The answer is no.
Steeler Lee says, do you think not taking an outside cornerback in the draft shows heavy faith in Corey Trice?
Well, they technically did in Ryan Watts. I mean, if he's going to play cornerback, he's going to play the outside. I don't know where he's going to play in the NFL. I don't think it shows heavy faith in Corey Trice. I just think the board fell to them in different ways, and they wanted to prioritize different things. I think that there are options at cornerback still in free agency that are better than options elsewhere. And I just think that Mason McCormick, I think they had rated high long before, the 4th round. I think they had Peyton Wilson probably in the 2nd, Roman Wilson in the 2nd as well. They just weren't going to avoid those guys. I think they want Corey Trice to turn into a depth piece, but I don't think they hold any expectations right now. He's coming off of an injury. He's an injury-prone player. It's really tough to say that this guy is going to make an impact. They're hoping for it, but I don't think that it's showing faith in it. I think that's just kind of how the board fell.
Joshua also wants to know thoughts on Trenton Thompson, who played solid last year. Do you think he returns?
Yeah. He's still on the roster, and I think he's a guy that could get an opportunity to make the team this year. I think he does play nickel. He does play slot. I think he's an option there. I think they liked what they saw him. We talked about Eric Rowe the other day. I think if a guy's going to stop them from adding another safety, it's going to be Trenton Thompson. I think there's an opportunity for him to make the team. We'll see what happens with him. He showed good flashes in a short amount of time, but he's only had a couple of games under his belt in the NFL. So I'm excited to see what he could bring when healthy and back at training camp.
Tristan Vogt has another secondary question. Says, do you think Justin Simmons is still an option for the Steelers?
No, I think Justin Simmons is off the board. I don't know what's going on with Justin Simmons. I think it's wild. I think if we get to like July and nothing's happening and training camp has started and, they're just like, why not? Then why not? But I would say right where we stand right now, I don't think Justin Simmons is on their mind. Again, things change once training camp starts and injuries happen and so on and so forth. So I could say maybe then, but for right now, where we stand, I'm going to say no.
This next question, you talked about Chark, but there's another name in there that I wanted to bring up. It says Gallup, Chark, or Scantling if they don't get Sutton. What do you think? Gallup has reportedly signed a contract with the Vegas Raiders, so he might be out of the running for this one. You talked about Chark a little bit, but what about Montez Valdez Scantling?
Yeah, so DJ Chark, I like. Scantling, I like, I guess. I don't know. Like, I view them all as like bottom of the barrel. Like, if you're going to sign them, cool. But like, what's the difference from what you already have? Michael Gallup would have been the only name that's like, okay, this is like a quality wide receiver 4, maybe wide receiver 2, but he's off the board. I don't view any of them as, I mean, DJ Chark maybe, but I just don't view any of them as like realistic options for the Steelers right now where we stand. I think their first option is going to be trying to get somebody bigger. If they have to go smaller, they will. But again, I think that's more of a training camp thing. That's let's see what we got in the rookie class and with some undrafted guys and so on and so forth and go from there. But for right now, I'm going to say none of them. And Scantling, man, I'm not a Scantling fan. I like Chark much better.
Big Stretch wants to know, what's up, guys? What about Hunter Renfrow for the slot? I know we talked about him before, but now that there's Roman Wilson that could potentially be the slot, does that take Hunter Renfrow out of your running?
Yes, I think it does. I liked Hunter Renfrow. I think the Steelers had interest in Hunter Renfrow for like the last year. But I mean, how many slot guys can you have? And if you're going to get another one, it's going to be Deebo Samuel, and you're going to shoot for the stars here. But I just don't see Hunter Renfrow as an option right now. I don't. Again, training camp. This is a training camp option again, but I don't think he signs anytime soon. And I would say no. I think the Steelers have enough slot guys, and the way I look at it is they would give Calvin Austin an opportunity to be the wide receiver 3 before they went out and got a guy that they don't believe is like a strong wide receiver 2. So that's how I view Hunter Renfrow.
Broderick Wallace says, do you feel comfortable with the current running back room with Najee on the final year of his rookie contract?
Yeah, I get the worry there, but yes, 100%. I think that the Steelers wide receiver room is looking good. I think that they have potential. It's easy to find a running back, man. Like, that's how I look at this. It's like Jaylen Warren's got, I believe, 2 years left on his deal. And if you got to replace him next year or Najee next year, you could just draft somebody. And, you got Cordero Patterson for 2 years. Like, there are options here. You could go find a running back literally anywhere. There are going to be free agents. Running back is the least worrisome position, I think, in the NFL right now. And I get it. The Steelers are a running team, and they're gonna want to run the football a lot, and they're gonna want to bank on their running backs. But I don't think it's a position of worry for me right now, because I feel really good about where they stand this year, and I think they could figure it out with ease next year if they need to.
Joshua also wants to know, is Najee viewed as replaceable? It sounds like from your last answer that you're thinking along those lines.
Yeah, I don't think Najee gets his 5th-year option picked up. That's just my sense on the situation. I haven't heard anything. It's just my sense. I think Jaylen Warren is the guy that gets a contract if they give anybody a contract, and then they go and find somebody else. But I don't think Najee's going to be the guy that's here longer than maybe a year.
I'll cut in with a question of my own. Adam Schefter just reported that the Jacksonville Jaguars cut wide receiver Zay Jones. Do you think that would be an option for the Steelers?
How do you? This is my this is my response to this. Okay.
Yeah.
A month and a half ago, we're talking about how the San Francisco 49ers turned down an offer because from the Jacksonville Jaguars and countered it with a 1st-round pick and Zay Jones, and they said no. Why? Who did they get in the 1st round? I think it was Brian Thomas. It was Brian Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you wanted Brian Thomas over Brandon Aiyuk just to cut Zay Jones? Like, what are you doing? That one doesn't make any sense. Yeah, Zay Jones is definitely an option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. An immediate option, actually. Like, the second we get off this, there will be an article on allsteelers.com titled Zay Jones is an option for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because yes.
Chris also asks, guys, next year the Steelers have to make a hard decision at QB. My gut tells me that Fields is firmly our QB of the future. Do you agree?
Yes, and I do want to answer this, Chris, in 2 seconds, but first, John missed it because of an ad break, so I apologize. Adam Schefter just reported that Zay Jones was released by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Is he an option for the Steelers? The answer is certainly. All right, Chris. Guys, next year the Steelers have to make a hard decision at quarterback. My gut tells me that Fields is firmly our quarterback of the future. Do you agree? Yes. I think that Justin Fields gets extended before the start of the season for maybe 2 years, cheap deal. Keep him around, give him an opportunity. And then if Russ balls out this year, you figure it out next year with a Russ deal. Because I don't think Russell Wilson's going to look at the situation and say, hey, I won a Super Bowl. I think we can win a Super Bowl next year. I'm going to ask for a boatload of money so that we can't win a Super Bowl. I think it's going to be like, okay, let's sign a team-friendly, this works for both sides deal, and let's go try to do this again. But I think as we sit here right now, Justin Fields is the guy that gets a 2-year extension before the season starts and is the quarterback of the future for the Pittsburgh Steelers, or at least gets an opportunity to be for the next year or so.
That kind of knocks out this question as well. Hybrid God says, way too early, Noah, but did you hear anything about Tomlin liking Georgia quarterback Carson Beck? What do you know about the kid?
I will tell you this, and this is a great question, and I will say that early in this draft process, very, very early in this 2024 draft process, before the college football season even ended, Carson Beck was the name that was tossed out me as the name to watch for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the first round of the 2024 NFL draft. And when he decided he was not going into it, I immediately thought, man, I wonder where he's going to sit in 2025. I don't know if the Steelers are going to get a shot at him. I think he's going to climb up boards. If he does not, if he sits there around wherever they pick, I could see them highlighting Carson Beck. Mike Tomlin loves his Georgia guys. Carson Beck's a stud. I think that he's very undervalued at the college football level because he plays for Georgia and they just look at everybody as a monster. I think Carson Beck is certainly a name to watch, and that's a great question.
We got a couple of questions about reunions coming in here, and that's how we're going to close this out. Austin Dufour says, do you foresee the Steelers reuniting with an old face like Marcus Golden or Bud Dupree for more depth at outside linebacker?
I honestly, I don't know, to be honest with you. I thought I did at some point, but now where we stand here now, I'm like, well, how long is it going to go before you add another outside linebacker? I don't know where I see that. I think that a guy like Logan Lee might get an opportunity to be that guy. I think that DeMarvin Leal might get an opportunity to be that fourth outside linebacker. I really, really, truly do. I don't know if it's going to work out, but I think that he might get a shot there. I could see if I had to pick one, I'd say Bud Dupree is probably the more likely name to come back to Pittsburgh, just because I think he's going to be cheap and he's very productive last year. But I like Marcus Golden too. I think both of them are great. I could see either one of them, yes, but I don't know. I don't know right now as we stand here. I'm very confused about the situation.
Last one we'll finish with. June McDonald asks, is Peterson retiring or still trying to play, referencing the media's favorite, Patrick Peterson?
Yeah, Patrick Peterson, I would imagine, is still trying to play football. He says he's still trying to play football. His goal was always, I believe, 15 years, and I think he's got one. I think this is 15 here, so I think he's going to try. I think he gets a shot somewhere. I don't see why you don't sign Patrick Peterson if you need a corner. So I would imagine he shows up somewhere, but I do not look at him as an option for the Steelers really at all. I don't think that either side wants to make that reunion happen. So I think he's trying to play, but I don't think it's going to be in Pittsburgh.
All right. We do have one more actually here. It says, Jim D says, would you trade Freiermuth for Aiyuk, and should the Steelers take back Cam Sutton? But the 49ers radio said that San Francisco might be interested in Freiermuth for Aiyuk. I believe he's referencing Willard and Dibbs, and Dan Dibley, good guy. I used to work with him.
That's very interesting. Pat Freiermuth for Brandon Aiyuk. I mean, if you could spice the deal and make it a 3rd round pick and Pat Freiermuth for Brandon Aiyuk, I don't think that doesn't work out for either side. That being said, I don't think that that's going to happen for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm not going to say no, but I'm not going to say it's likely, because I just think that they're going to be looking at Pat Freiermuth then a 1st round pick or a 2nd round pick, and I just think Omar Khan's going to laugh at that and say, "What are you doing, pal?" So I think that I would say no, but that's a very, very interesting question right there.
All right, that's a wrap then for today.
Awesome. That's a wrap. With that, we're heading out of here, guys. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk and for chatting with us in another live stream. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcast, and go subscribe to our new YouTube channel, youtube.com/ All Steelers Talk clips. We will be back tomorrow, me, Nick, and Steven, to talk maybe some exciting news for the Pittsburgh Steelers and some trades as we just patiently wait for any news to break regarding the BMAC tweet. With that said, find all our work at allsteelers.com and enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.